This week on the Communicators, a discussion with Michael Copps, Democratic member of the Federal Communications Commission.
And we are pleased to welcome back to the Communicators FCC Commissioner Michael Copps. Commissioner, thank you for being with us. Also joining us here at the table is Amy Schatz of the Wall Street Journal. Commissioner, if I could start with the AT&T T-Mobile USA acquisition. What do you see as the biggest impediment to that happening, and how long do you see the process taking?
Well, last part first, I really don't know how long the process is going to take. There's some speculation it could be in the better part of a year. I don't know that it should take that long, but we'll just have to wait and see what the expectations at the Commission are. This is a huge transaction. It's a paradigm-altering transaction insofar as the world of wireless goes. You will remember in the Comcast merger that I said at the outset that was a very steep, would have been a very steep climb for me. I ended up voting against it. This is maybe even a steeper climb from the standpoint of a lot of power, a lot of influence given to one company in a world where two companies are going to control like 80% of the spectrum. So I would hope that my colleagues in looking at this transaction in the months ahead will be asking themselves some very serious questions about what residue of competition will be left if this merger is approved. What is the impact going to be on American jobs? I'm trying to find that out. I haven't had a satisfactory answer yet, but there will be time to delve into that, and I hope and trust that we will. There's a lot of money on the table for that. How much of that money is going to end up in Europe supporting telecommunications there rather than the United States? So it's a big deal, but as much as anything, what kind of troubles me is that this just kind of sucks the oxygen out of so many issues that are pending before the Federal Communications Commission. You know, we can chew gum and walk at the same time, I guess, but this affects so much of what we're doing. I think whether this goes forward or not has an effect on the whole issue of spectrum auctions. I think it has an impact on public safety. And the list just goes on and on. So it's a lot to absorb, and you know, I've been at the Commission almost 10 years now, and it seems sometimes we're just kind of the Federal Merger Commission. That's because companies bring us so many mergers, and it's always the last one. You know, we're not going to be back. But as soon as you approve one, then somebody else is through the door saying, hey, you let the other guy get real big, so you got to let us do too, or else it's not fair.
Commissioner, in 2005, how did you vote on the AT&T BellSouth merger?
Well, we had a lot of negotiation back and forth on the BellSouth merger, and managed to attach some network neutrality conditions and things like that. It was not a happy merger, happy occasion in the final result, but I think we made it better than it would otherwise have been.
And before we get to Amy, I just want to read one piece of an recent editorial in the New York Times entitled, "Looks Like a Duopoly." This is what the New York Times writes. "This doesn't mean that AT&T's proposed purchase of T-Mobile should be rejected, but the hurdle must be high. The FCC and the Department of Justice must ascertain that the arrangement does not reduce competition any further. In fact, for the acquisition to be deemed in the public interest, it should ideally lead to more competition. AT&T could be required to sell chunks of its network or divest swaths of spectrum. Regulators could impose conditions like mandatory data roaming on the AT&T network or a commitment to provide non-discriminatory access to data from third parties on its wireless network."
Well, I think there's a lot of merit in there, but the question is, you know, why do we spend so much time trying to make the what some people would deem unpalatable minimally acceptable? Is that the kind of telecommunications market we ought to be working for? Is that the best we can do for competition? Is that the best we can do for consumers? Is that the best we can do for jobs?
Amy Schatz.
So, and you've dealt with a lot of these mergers in the last almost 10 years that you've been at the Commission.
Many, many.
What kind of conditions would you want to see imposed on this, or what kind of conditions have you tried to impose on other deals that are
well,
similar
I'm not
to
into
this?
certainly conditions, and as you can probably divine from my initial comments, this is something that would be a very steep climb for me in the first place. But I would hope if there's going to be a majority at the Commission that is going to approve of this, that we would be obviously looking at market by market and what divestitures might be called for. That's certainly important. I think certainly the open internet, network neutrality is important. And just looking at the level of concentration and market power across the board is important. So it comes down to all of the considerations that go into deciding whether this serves the public interest, convenience, and necessity. That's our charge in this. So it's a pretty wide-ranging charge that we have under the statute, and I hope that we will fulfill it.
You were saying that you thought that this could sort of, if not derail, at least slow some of the other priorities of the Commission, whether it's the incentive auctions or maybe the D-block. Can you explain a little bit more about how that might happen?
I think not just at the Commission, but perhaps in the Hill too. I'm not one, having worked in the Hill for 15 years, I'm not going to predict what the Hill is going to do, but if we're talking about incentive auctions and things like that, does this change the name of the game for that? If you're going to have one less competitor in the wireless market, does that make the spectrum incentive auction idea more or less attractive? With regard to public safety and the D-block and who holds how much spectrum and 700 megahertz, I think those are all factors that that might have the effect of encouraging some folks to say, well, let's see what happens before we go ahead and act.
NAB Chair Gordon Smith was recently on this program, and here's what he had to say about potential spectrum auctions. Want to get your reaction to it.
What your viewers need to understand is the difference between broadcast spectrum, the way we utilize it, and the way wireless uses it, is that when we use it, our transmission is one to everyone in a demographic area. So it's very efficiently used. When you look at the way Wi-Fi does it, if I send you a video on my iPhone, it's me to you. It's one to one. It takes a tremendous amount of bandwidth. The truth is, we're in the video business. They want to be in the video business. Video is what creates the congestion. No one does it more efficiently than we do. And there's probably, if you took all of broadcast spectrum, there probably isn't enough spectrum in the universe to manage one-to-one video on every mobile device in the Wi-Fi broadband world.
Commissioner Kopp.
Well, I hope we're not getting into communications, a civil war. Probably we are, but having to choose, I consider myself a friend of broadcasters, particularly small independent broadcasters, and I think their utilization of the public spectrum very often serves the nation well. On the other hand, I understand full well that spectrum needs to be used and utilized, and there are swaths of broadcast spectrum, particularly the digital dividend that resulted from the DTV transition, that are not being fully used. Certain it is that we need more spectrum for wireless, no question about that. These are very spectrum hungry devices, but I want to avoid generalizations. I don't think you can say in every instance it serves the public interest to remove spectrum from a broadcaster and give it to maybe a wireless duopoly or something like that. I think we have to look at it, you know, instance by instance, market by market, and realize that both broadcasters and wireless perform absolutely essential public services in the 21st century, and that those who are doing a good job should be recognized for doing a good job, and that includes a lot of broadcasters.
One of the things the broadcasters have been saying is that there are spectrum holders, like cable companies or others, who aren't really using their spectrum efficiently, if at all. And the FCC has an inventory in that they know, the FCC knows who has airwaves, but they don't really know if they're using them. Do you think there is some merit to the idea of actually looking at whether people are using their airwaves?
I don't think there's anyone in the United States of America that has the foggiest idea right now at this minute, as the three of us sit around this table, how much spectrum is being utilized for what particular purpose, and I think it would be helpful to know that. That does not mean that we should remain motionless or inactive in the months ahead. I think we understand that we need more spectrum for wireless. But as we proceed along this path, and before we get to the end game or the end of the road, we ought to have a better idea of what's going on with that spectrum. The Commission is making strides toward that with the Spectrum Dashboard and other initiatives that it's taking. I applaud those, but we need to do more.
And there's been a lot of talk about a spectrum inventory. Is there any drop-dead date for that to actually occur?
No, I think the Commission feels that it's making good progress in getting sort of a basic type of inventory up there with the dashboard. There will be a legislative push for spectrum inventory again. We'll see where that goes, but in the meantime, I would hope that we would be using all of our considerable resources to get that inventory going. And it's not an easy task to do this. It's time consuming, it's resource intensive, it costs a lot of money in an era of shrinking budgets, but I don't know that you have to go out and send a truck into every village in town to measure the spectrum, but we should be doing really a credible sample so we have a good idea, particularly in those markets where there's a spectrum crunch of what's lying fallow there and what could be used for something else.
Commissioner Copps, I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is you regret that at times the FCC has become the Federal Merger Commission. How do you avoid becoming that merger commission and having to set conditions on every deal that comes before you?
Well, it's very difficult, and the private sector drives a lot of this, and the private sector modus operandi has changed in the telecommunications world, and in the media world we've gone, just like the rest of the economy, we've gone through enormous concentration in recent years, and there's that mindset out there that all of these much sought after but seldom achieved economies and efficiencies are the wave of the future. Seldom are they realized in these mergers, but often they are sought. So the private sector drives that, but the Commission has, or can have input here too in the approach that it takes toward mergers. So can the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. And government spent a lot of time during the first 8 years that I was here blessing this kind of consolidation, not just blessing it, but actually encouraging it. So it wasn't just the private sector. It was the public sector encouraging this consolidation, while at the same time the Commission moved away from a lot of the dedication and commitment it had to public interest oversight and regulation. And at some point we have to decide whether we're really serious about having competition or not. And if you're going to have this constant trend toward duopoly or monopoly, then there has to be some rules of the road. There has to be some oversight. There has to be some regulation. I'm not hesitant to use that term. That's how we looked at monopolies for a long period of time over the last 100 years as regulated. If we're serious, on the other hand, about fostering competition, then let's get about the job of doing that and have some rules of the road. And maybe at that point, the private sector and companies will begin to understand that any and all mergers are not going to be automatically rubber stamped or passed with conditions when they come to the Federal Communications Commission.
This is C-SPAN's Communicators program. Our guest is FCC Commissioner Michael Copps. Also joining us, Amy Schatz of the Wall Street Journal.
So the FCC used to have spectrum caps in place. To prevent companies from getting too big. And then I think it was during, it might be the PAL era, but I'm not entirely sure. Right. They did away with them. Do you think it's time to bring them back?
I was not in favor of that. I think it would have been much better had we continued with spectrum caps and avoided some of the excessive concentration we've had since then. Yes, I think that's something that that we could consider. The numbers would have to change, or the percentage would have to change, probably just given what the inevitable thing, well, the things that did happen in the market. I noticed just the other day, Ofcom in Great Britain announced that it's going to have this enormous auction for like 250 megahertz of spectrum, and they're putting limits on the amount that any bidder can end up with, and it's premised on the idea that they think there should be at least a minimum of 4 wholesale competitors in each of those in that spectrum.
So when you talk about limits on auctions, if we're talking about incentive auctions and actually auctioning off TV airwaves, do you think there might be, or there should be, any limits in place to prevent or to help continue to have diversity on the airwaves? Because you could see that there could be some low-powered, or some stations might want to sell airwaves,
well,
and may not have that kind of diversity.
That's what I'm worried
anymore.
about. Who do you think the original candidates are going to be who step up and say, okay, we have this incentive auction idea now, and I'm going to participate? I think there's 2 probably, and the first is going to be the hard-pressed minority station or a diversity station in a big city who's trying its best to serve the public interest, but the economics just aren't working. The advertiser's not there, and try as they might, they're going to have to, they might want to take advantage of this and something else. The other is going to be those, the hedge funds and the banks and folks that own the big stations, and to them it's just a numbers game. You know, if they look at it and say, well, keep it, we can make this much money, sell the licensing or participate in this auction, we'll make 15 cents more. I can tell you which one they're going to take. They're going to take the one that's 15 cents more, because that's just the dynamic that they operate under, and whatever happened to the public interest.
Commissioner Copps, on another issue, there was a recent news report about the rollout and deployment of the Broadband National Plan, and that it was behind schedule or not fully at schedule. Do you think that's a fair report? And if the FCC could, how would you increase the deployment?
No, I'm hopeful that we're on track. It took a while to develop that broadband strategy, the National Broadband Plan, but it provided a roadmap for 8 years. We had done nothing in the way of developing a broadband strategy for the United States of America, so we now have that strategy, and I believe that this year of 2011 can really be a good year. Now, that might be counterintuitive, and people might say, oh, the political dynamic is changing, not going to get anything done. I don't believe that. I think there's a lot of bipartisan interest in finally stepping up to universal service and inter-carrier compensation and these other convoluted issues and solving them. And I think if you look at the agenda of the FCC, we're starting to get in now to implementing this in a substantive way. So I think we can do a lot this year, and I'm afraid that if we don't do a lot this year, you know, when is the next chance going to be for us to do this? I think there's sort of an alignment of the stars. It's not perfect, but it's sufficient to allow us to move ahead and to make some progress. So by the end of this year, I would like to see the FCC have approved a transition plan, a fairly detailed transition plan on universal service and inter-carrier compensation, and that doesn't mean every last T has to be crossed or I dotted or number filled in, but pretty explicit, because companies have to know, investors have to know, innovators have to know, and it would be nice for consumers to know too where we're going with these two very important programs. And then I would like to see some reports and orders passed, getting us on with the job, and I think that is doable, and I think there's a commitment there in the Commission to get that done, and I certainly hope so.
In your view, what's the biggest obstacle to USF reform?
Just people used to another system for many, many years, a system that is not serving the public interest well, is not responsive to the needs of the broadband era and the digital era, but people are used to doing business that way. And you have to change mindsets, and you have to get everybody to understand everybody's going to have to sacrifice a little bit, that the rules of the game are not going to be the same, because we cannot afford for them to be the same, and that we're in a different era, a different technological period, and these systems are going to have to undergo some fairly significant change. So the opposite is really getting people to sit down around a table and think bottom line where you can come out. I don't want to go around and have sessions where people are just bringing us their Santa Claus wish lists of what they like on universal service or carrier comp. We've done that for years and years and years, and we're still at the same place. So I think what we have to encourage at the FCC is some sessions here in the next few months that we sit with them, or they sit first with themselves and then with us, and we get what people can really live with and get an understanding, and then we take all that back and in a very short period of time come up with our proposed rules.
So far the FCC is really only talking on USF about the distribution side. Hasn't really said much about the contribution side. So what would you say is the impact that this is going to be on consumers?
I think we need to look at the contribution side, and I think if we do it right, it will be a good impact for everybody. But if we had broadband not only on the distribution part of USF, but on the contribution part, it would mean considerable extra money, and it should be there because broadband is, these providers are selling the triple play, they're making more money, so there's, I think, some obligation for them to participate in support of a universal system that is going to be, hopefully, serving the needs of the broadband era. So I am for including that. I am for Congress passing something that would allow a collection of intrastate collection of revenues based on intrastate revenue. That would make an enormous addition to the wisdom of the program. I think it would increase the revenue base from something like $68 to $230 billion. It's enormous. It would reduce the contribution factor by an order of 70%. So this is a fixable system, and it's a doable system, but we just got to make sure people know we're serious and it's about to happen, and let's get your final last best offers.
Commissioner Cobbs, as we enter the political season of 2012, the Media Access Project has proposed changes to the disclosure rules for political broadcasts. Here's what they write. 2 basic changes to the existing rules are needed. First, the rules must require that sponsorship identification be made based on who is actually paying for a message. Second, the public file provisions must be updated to reflect current practices. Do you see changes in the sponsorship rules?
I certainly hope so, and I've been talking about this for months and months. I think if you've got an ad on TV and you see this little line comes up and it says paid for by Citizens for Spacious Skies and Amber Waves of Grain, but if you really knew who was sponsoring it, it was a chemical company that was refusing to clean up a toxic dump. I think citizens and consumers have a right to know that, and I think it's a disservice that they don't. Folks are trying to buy elections. There was, like $2 billion, I think, nearly $2 billion that went into political advertisements, most of them attack ads in the last session and or the last election cycle. So I'm not trying to cut off those ads, but I think Media Access Project is headed down a good road. I think the time has come for this. I think people have a right to know who's putting it on the air. If you put a bottle of Coca-Cola right here now in this program, somebody will say, well, you have to product placement, were you paid for that or something like that. Here we're talking about the future of democracy, and people who are trying to influence elections, don't people have just as much or more of a right to know that? I think they do. So I think this is a bipartisan, small d, democratic, patriotic, right thing for us to do. And I salute the Media Access Project for trying to elevate the attention of this matter at the Federal Communications Commission, and I hope that my colleagues will follow up and will take a really serious look and do something about it.
Have you got any assurances from them that they might do something on it?
No.
Okay. One thing that you've talked a lot about over the years is media ownership, and that's one thing that we all know that the FCC is behind on, the ever-present annual review or semi-annual quadrennial review. Right. So you're behind it for this year, and there's also supposed to be a Future of Media report that's coming out soon. What would you like to see the recommendations be in that report?
Strong and hard-hitting. I would like to see it come out soon, or the Future of the Media report will end up being the past of the media report. It's been pending for a while. we need to be more active on media. As you know, this has been kind of the thing that drives me at the FCC, to make sure that we get our media right, particularly in this age when there's so much change going on. You've had all of this consolidation, you've had downsizing of newsrooms, firing of journalists, investigative journalism put on the endangered species list. We're in deep, deep trouble, I think, because of the lack of investigative journalism, and that's newspapers, it's broadcast, internet, it's the whole thing. We really have to be addressing that. So I think we need to come with some good, hard-hitting reports, recommendations. I would love to see some return to public interest licensing process for broadcast licensees. That doesn't solve the whole problem, but it begins to solve some of the problem. And I think the licensing process ought to go back to where it used to be every 3 years. You know, for years and years it was 3 years. Now it's 8 years. We used to have guidelines and public interest guidelines, and you'd look at it and see if a station was making an effort to serve the public interest. Those are almost all gone now. It's basically postcard renewal. You send in your postcard, you get your license. That's no way to treat the stewardship of the public airwaves. So I would like to see us have some public interest guidelines to encourage localism and diversity, and I think part of those guidelines need to be kind of news-centric. Not interfering in the content of the news, but is the station putting more resources? Are they investing in the news? Is it important to them, or are they cutting back? And I think that would be one of the factors that we would look at. But we really need to do something about this, because I don't think we can afford another 4 or 5 years of this hemorrhaging of reporting and journalism that we've been through without doing grave injustice and damage to our country.
Any comment on your former colleague, Michael Powell, going over to head the NCTA?
Well, I congratulate him, and did congratulate him, and worked with Michael. We didn't always agree, but he knows a lot. He's experienced, smart, personable, so I'm sure the cable folks will welcome him with open arms, and I will look forward to seeing a little bit more of him maybe in the months ahead.
I'm sure he'll also enjoy doing the media ownership review again too, as we move forward on that.
Deja vu all over
a little
again.
bit, yeah. He had such a good time with that last time, so I'm sure that will be good times for him. You know, getting back to that though, I mean, the rules that he had proposed are still in the courts. The Kevin Martin rules are still in the courts, and now so we're talking about another quadrennial review where, you know, you might be talking about something like this where you change the rules somewhat to increase
right.
You know, the public interest aspects for broadcasters. I mean, do you think at this point, given the fact that all of these things are already in court, that it's even possible for the FCC to move forward?
Yes, I do,
something?
and I think you have to kind of segment this a little bit. I think the ownership rules are kind of structural and go to the numbers, and we can do some of that, but Congress may have to do some of that, and it's kind of a time-consuming thing. But we can make a down payment on media reform, and that gets less to the structural rules and more to the behavioral rules and the public interest guidelines and the approach that I'm talking about. And the FCC has the authority to do that right now. We could call that, put out a notice of proposed rulemaking, and in fact we've got some on localism already out there, and bring it to a vote and do it. And we should have done that by now. I don't want to see media become the orphan child of the Commission, but in point of fact, we need to do more on these important media questions than the Commission has thus far done.
And finally, Commissioner Copps, if you could reflect on your 10 years on the Commission, perhaps give us a hint of what your future plans are, and what structural changes would you like to see in how the FCC operates? Well,
you know, I haven't done a lot of reminiscing because we have such an important year ahead, and I think we can make so much progress, and I just hope we don't have a government shutdown. We're all out of a job. I'd like to see us all keep working. But as I look back over the 10 years here, I think making the media questions a matter of public issue and public moment, although we have not got to a satisfactory resolution, is important. And no matter what I do, in the years ahead, it will be somehow associated with working on those issues and pushing for action if we don't get the kind of action I would like this year. I think I was pleased to play a role in talking about broadband and the open internet as soon as I got to the commission back in 2001, and pointing out that the internet could be in some peril because of potential gatekeeper control. I'm proud of reaching out to non-traditional stakeholders. Native Americans and the disabilities come to mind, people who are so profoundly impacted by decisions that are made at the FCC, but often did not have the input that the big company with the lawyer and the lobbyist in Washington, D.C. have. So I think all of that was important. Of course, I was there during the DTV transition and was acting chairman too. So it's been a wonderful experience. As I say, my thoughts now are mostly on the rest of this year, but when I leave the commission, I will not leave these issues behind.
Any structural changes you'd like to see to how the FCC operates?
You know, one thing I would like to see, and I hope we can get the Congress to respond, is to change the so-called closed meeting rule. We are prohibited at the commission from more than 2 commissioners ever talking to one another unless it's a public meeting. So unlike Congress or unlike the courts, we can't just sit down around a table and you could have general counsel present or somebody, so it's a matter of public record, and talk. And you know, there's 5 people there. Each one has a different skill set and range of experiences that he or she brings with them. And there's a lot to be exchanged and a lot that can be done with regard to that. There's legislation that has been introduced by Chairwoman Eshoo and Congressman Doyle and Congressman Shimkus. And I am really hoping that that will move ahead, because I think it would expedite the business of the commission. We all get along well right now, but I think it would take it to a new level of collegiality in getting things done, and we might have avoided some of the problems that we've had in the past if we had it. So that, if I could have one reform just magically appear before I leave, that would be it.
And Amy Schatz, you have a final question for the commission?
Well, actually, it's actually a follow-up on that question, because, I mean, to play devil's advocate on that idea, I mean, some people would argue already the FCC does so many things behind closed doors, and those public meetings that you have every month are so scripted that it's almost worse to have you all sitting around a table privately sort of deciding things, because the public really doesn't get involved.
No, I don't agree with that, because, you know, members of Congress, when they're crafting legislation and bills, are talking. Members of the court, before they decide a Supreme Court case, sit around and talk about it. You have to have some protections. I mean, you wouldn't let 3 people of one party meet and gang up on the other 2. It wouldn't be super secret. You'd have Office of General Counsel there. You would have some sort of a record. But it's just the way that you need to do business. Why should this be the one institution? And it affects other executive agencies too. Why should they be denied this opportunity to share experiences and perspectives and kind of work stuff out around the table? And I just think it would expedite business. I don't know how different the final results are going to be. I think they would probably be better. But, you know, there's plenty of opportunity right now for the staffs to get together, or for you to do what you want to do one-on-one, I guess. But we're missing important opportunities for some positive interaction that I think could lead to some positive policy outcomes.
Commissioner Michael Copps, as always, thank you for being on the Communicators, and Amy Schatz of the Wall Street Journal, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me.
Tonight, C-SPAN's coverage of the annual Congressional Correspondents' Dinner. Speakers include Larry Wilmore of The Daily Show, Senator Rand Paul, and Representative Cedric Richmond